Last year, the Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute joined with Transparency International in celebrating their 25 years of existence. Locally, we have to say through the efforts of people like Reginald Dumas, Winston Rudder, and a few others, Frank Clark, and so on. Our institution was conceived perhaps about 20 years ago. So there's a lot of history, a lot of work that has gone behind an entity like ours, which is a civil society organization, a non-governmental organization, and essentially volunteer-based. All members of our board are volunteers and have other, perhaps full-time work that they do. Even with all of that, we have been able, for example, to advocate for and push the new procurement legislation, something we shall turn to in a few minutes. But we have been in the vineyards, as we say, for many years, 15, 18 years, pushing this new procurement legislation. We've also had work done with the Auditor General, looking at his report and trying to identify with him and with members of Parliament and parliamentary committees what are the issues arising out of the Auditor General's report, and how can we get solutions from the Parliament itself. We have established our local legal aid clinic within the institution, the Advocacy and Legal Advice Center, and we have upwards of 90 odd clients that we are right now treating with. The idea behind that clinic was to give victims and witnesses of corruption an opportunity to get advice on a matter which is so sensitive that many legal or law enforcement agencies may not have the time or the opportunity to deal with, and we can take it to another level. We are very appreciative of the assistance provided by the High Commission, particularly in respect of one of our major projects. We firmly believe that we can influence a difference in the generation next. And we talk about our integrity clubs. For those of you who may not know, right here, last year, we launched the Integrity Club project with a pilot of 6 schools from Tobago and across Trinidad. And right now, with the funding available to us from the British High Commission, we are rolling out a program of training, a program of developing our young people in the secondary schools, and also training the teachers as ambassadors of integrity. This work is going on very quietly as we hope to influence that change in the next generation, something you will hear more of and I hope you will read about. We have partnered with the Arthur Lockjack Institute because, as you see there, corruption, if the private sector doesn't fund it, the public sector can't do it. So somehow inside our headspace, there's a traditional view that corruption is rooted only in the public sector. And in fact, the CPI is a measure, an indicator of the public's perception of public sector corruption. But one hand can't clap. It's 2 hands that clap. And although before now we have paid a lot of attention to public sector corruption, we have for the first time, and we are one of only 13 chapters in the Transparency universe that is looking at something called business integrity. And we have, with Lockjack Institute, we have completed a report called the Business Integrity Country Agenda, which is a baseline report, including surveys of the practices in the private sector, the shortcomings that they see in the public sector, and a gap analysis, how we can fill those things. That will lead to other initiatives, including training and workshops within the private sector. We believe that a single approach will not help us deal with this phenomenon called corruption. We believe we need to tackle from the young, which we are doing, the public sector, which we are doing, and the private sector. Like High Commissioner, we underscore, and all of those who work in this area, we underscore, and as you will see from the releases to come shortly, it is those countries which have a strong basis of rule of law, strong institutions, strong civil society organizations, which do well in the CPI. Let me return now to the procurement legislation. For some time, as I mentioned, together with other civil society bodies, and I think a representative of the Contractors Association is here, as well as the GCC is here. We have joined with other civil society bodies to advocate for new procurement legislation. We have functioned under the Central Tenders Board Act for many years, too many years. And most of us have seen the benefit of new legislation. We happily applauded when the Procurement Regulator was appointed and the board was appointed with him. And we look forward to the operationalization of the legislation. We understand from what I've read that the Minister of Finance has indicated that the act will be properly operationalized by the end of the first quarter of this year. I wait to hear what Mr. Lalchan will say. On that note, let me introduce Mr. Moonilal Lalchan, MBA, FCCA, CE. Mr. Lalchan is the Chairman and Procurement Regulator of the Procurement Board of Trinidad and Tobago. In the past, he has served on the Board of Governors and was also Chairman of the Audit Committee of the National Energy Skills Center, the NESC. I was once a member of that committee, Mr. Lalchan, as well as Chairman of the Board of Directors of InvestTT Limited and the Education Facilities Company Limited. No stranger to the directorships in a number of prestigious firms, Mr. Moonilal is a former Director and Vice President, Finance and Planning at the Atlantic LNG Company of Trinidad and Tobago, a former Director of several RBC financial institutions and the Hotel Facilitation Company Limited. With charitable work always close to his heart, Mr. Moonilal was a director of the Heroes Foundation and several other charitable organizations, in addition to being a past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Holding an EMBA from Auburn University, from Alabama in the US, and the Advanced Management Program, AMP 165 of Harvard Business School, Moonilal is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago and served on its council. As a fellow of the Chartered Association of Certified Accountants of the UK, he has spoken in conferences in oil and gas and financing in the USA, the UK, and the Middle East. I am told he's also a committed family man, and he enjoys, but he doesn't play golf, football, and cricket. Let me welcome Mr. Moonilal.
A pleasant good morning to all. It is indeed a treasured opportunity to deliver the keynote address on this very significant occasion, the launch of the Corruption Perception Index 2018, and to address the topic, corruption and the crisis of democracy. With your permission, I would like to add the subtitle, Are we part of the problem, or are we part of the solution? If you will bear with me, let's start from the basics. The term democracy emanates from two Greek words, demos, the people, and kratia, power of authority. In its purest incarnation, it is supposed to be a form of government that gives power to the people being the population at large. But how, when, and to which people is the question to be answered. For we observe that in many democracies around the world, elected governments have failed unreservedly to deliver even the most basic of services to their people. We have witnessed time and again the proliferation of selective development, for instance, where most of the public spending is done in areas and communities with voting bases, all in the interest of personal gain, a real blow to democracy. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, Foreign Bribery Report 2014 confirms that public procurement is one of the government's activities most vulnerable to corruption due to the volume of transactions and the financial interests at stake. In their study, they discovered that 2/3 of the foreign bribery cases occurred in sectors closely associated with contracts or licensing through public procurement. They also established that between 10 to 30% of the investment in publicly funded projects is lost through mismanagement. The gravity of this situation cannot be overemphasized. Just imagine for a moment our country, Trinidad and Tobago, having a budget of 50 billion, and of that, let's say about 50% being allocated to public procurement. Through efficiencies and the deliberate obliteration of corruption, 20% of that, about $5 billion, can go back into improving the lives of the very people that gave the government the authority to spend that money in the first case. So yes, if corruption is left to continue, there will certainly be a crisis of democracy, if on this basis it is not here already. And I dare say may have been with us for quite a while. But is corruption in government solely responsible for this demise of democracy? The resounding and obvious answer is no. Let us pause for a moment to dissect and digest the operative word bribery in this OECD's findings. Why bribery? Because bribery is the offering of something that serves to unfairly induce or influence an outcome in a business or personal transaction. Now, as far as we are all aware, I am sure one doesn't bribe oneself. One has to be bribed. To me, that suggests two or more parties must be involved. Someone has to offer, and someone must accept for it to become a legitimate bribe. Well, no pun intended. If we continue logically along this line, it therefore means that the private sector, and Dion would have mentioned this, the private sector, businesses, small and large, also have a role to play in ensuring they deal honestly when offering their goods and services to governments and other public bodies. To this end, it is safe to agree with notable French writer François de la Rochefoucauld, we shall not trust democracy without extremely powerful system of accountability. I'll just repeat that. We should not trust democracy without extremely powerful systems of accountability. And so, particularly as small democratic nations, we should be proud of the fact that we have insisted on the implementation of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act 2015 as amended, and its attendant demands to uphold the tenets of good governance, namely accountability, transparency, integrity, and value for money. Let us think for a moment how much more empowered in the name of democracy our citizens could have been if, say, 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, we had this act in place. Seriously, ask yourselves, what could have been the possibilities for Trinidad and Tobago? Would we be facing the kind of economic tumult we do now? I could easily argue, no, we would not, because it is well known that corruption is the bane of public procurement. To cement this, macro-level studies using country-level data to explore cross-country variations in both governance and economic indicators have consistently found that corruption significantly decreases economic growth and development. Trinidad and Tobago specifically certainly reaped the fruit of corruption, having scored 41 points out of 100 on the 2017 Corruption Perception Index. And as you are aware, this is not a recent development, as the CPI in Trinidad and Tobago averaged 39.06 from 2001 until 2017, reaching an all-time high of 53 points in 2001 and a record low of 32 points in 2006. To paraphrase the words of the economists, no country can ignore its reputation for corruption, and so no country can ignore Transparency International. I would go so far as to say no country should. By Trinidad and Tobago doing just that, ignoring it, today we are reasonably reaping the rewards seen in this country's low attractiveness for foreign investment and international trade, artificially high prices for low quality products and services, inefficient allocation of resources, uneven distribution of wealth, low quality education, infrastructure and healthcare. The list can go on and on. But I note with appreciation on the TTTI's website your support and declaration that Trinidad and Tobago has taken a step in the right direction with the establishment of the Office of Procurement Regulation. And as the country's first procurement regulator, it is my honor not only to stand, but to pledge my allegiance together with my board, with the TTTI in its mission to stop corruption and promote transparency, accountability, and integrity at all levels and across all sectors of our society. I also challenge our citizens to be change agents, not to be same agents, to change our legacy of an embarrassingly poor corruption perception index, to really stop and ask, are we part of the problem or are we part of the solution? To be a part of the solution means truly coming together to protect and return integrity to our democracy. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, we will live to see its intended benefits come to bear. Redounding benefits, not only to the country, but to self, to family, to our children, to our grandchildren. Winston Churchill's words ring truer than ever today. Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. Do we want to be condemned to repeat corruption and failure? I certainly do not. So even in the face of political science scholars who have concluded that no perfect democratic system can exist, we can certainly try our best by demanding public procurement best practice and reducing corruption through rigorous checks and balances. But stubbornly refusing to be part of the problem, we accept our responsibility as being part of the solution, and then we can all successfully band together against corruption. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you all success in the deliberation as this event progresses.